This is an Executive Intelligence Review, December 5th through 11th, 1978. Sometimes you have to just, without knowing what you're looking for, you have to jump in. And really interesting things in this issue having to do with Jim Jones. Really interesting to go back in time to this period. It was such a dynamic period, and you could still see the cracks. You could still see the schisms. You could still... now, of course, I think it's much more monolithic. That's why I find this particular time period really interesting, digging back. Previously, I've been reading articles covering the early 80s. This one is late 70s. And I've been going into how the black nobility and the aristocracy dovetail with dirty politics, mafia, and banking, and particularly those elements that have been fueling the Malthusian depopulation agenda, which is nothing new, goes back to this time. It's a very raw, almost by today's standards, almost barbaric. There was just waves of terrorism and infighting and backstabbing, and so of course it's very disorganized. I was talking to a friend earlier today, and I was saying, the problem with most people, they try to figure out how the world works, and they tend to think that it's sort of this kind of hyper-organized, almost Freemasonic, top-down, perfectly synchronized, seamless construction of ingenious kind of stovepiping, but what I see increasingly is a lot of irrationalism and infighting and factions within factions, and chaos and megalomania. And I have a lot of unanswered questions, but the way the world works is not at all the way even very clever people assume that it does. And I'm developing, trying to make mental maps of what I am seeing. I just have to tell you that everybody seems to be wrong, including this latest, the bombing, the so-called big expose, this very important definitive expose by Seymour Hersh, in which I don't think he even mentions the British. It's clear to me, if you know anything, that the British were behind this whole thing, and the Americans are basically providing the assets to accomplish it. Probably you had Charles III calling up Rupert Soames and issuing the order through Serco, and then perhaps Kinetic coordinating the whole operation with MI6 and CIA, and then the idea that Biden himself has the authority to carry out such a thing, or that he even has at his disposal the necessary intelligence or apparatus that would be required to do this is ridiculous. And interestingly, going back to 1978 and this article particularly, you can see the real power structure in the world. So let's get into this. A friend of mine was asking me about the Aldo Moro murder, and I just happened upon this sort of in line with what else I've been researching. So the truth about the Moro murder breaks into Italy's press. The Queen is responsible, headlined last weekend's Panorama, considered to be Italy's equivalent of Time magazine. The Queen didn't work all alone, helping her with the English Secret Services, the Israeli Shin Beth, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, the Socialist International, the aristocracy in general. Panorama flatly announced in a review of Who Killed Aldo Moro, the drug terrorism expose produced by the European Labour Party, ELP. The Panorama coverage coincides with both a Milan European Labour Party roundtable discussion held to pass on further information of the drug terrorism network in Italy and the worst wave of terror since the events leading up to the January collapse of former Andreotti government and the subsequent kidnapping of Moro 3 months later. Those knowledgeable of the Panorama editorial policy as well as its financial backing in the circles of Fiat magnate Gianni Agnelli were no doubt shocked to see the magazine detail the documentation by the ELP of the British Zionist dope-peddling circles which carried out the attack on Moro. However, Panorama's worry that the Italian authorities are actually acting on the ELP evidence was expressed in their version of the expose, edited to read as assertions with no proof. Nevertheless, it is well known among relevant circles that the ELP's Moro brief is under close scrutiny inside the Interior and Justice Ministries and security services, who snatched up all available copies at the nationally attended press conference where the brief was first presented to the public earlier this year. Drugs and murder. The European Labour Party recently sponsored a highly successful roundtable discussion on the drug problem in Milan, Italy, with the participation of Italian Communist Party members, the Milan and Veneto anti-drug centers, a magistrate, various newspapers, including the Catholic Studi Cattolici, and others. Speakers at the discussion laid out in detail the British-controlled international drug network and its interface with international, including Italian, terrorism targeting those institutions and institutions and individuals who must be exposed if the nation is to rid itself of the source of funding for the gigantic terror wave and accompanying destabilizations which now threaten the stability of the government. As leading individuals investigating Italian terrorism corroborated to the ELP just prior to the Milan roundtable discussion, drugs lie at the heart of the terrorist problems. It is the dope peddling networks which fund terrorism, and drugs are the basis for recruitment into terrorist gangs. Not surprisingly, therefore, the noted Italian Communist Party, PCI, judicial expert and journalist Mauro Brutto was murdered in the classical Italian staged car accident the day before the ELP's roundtable discussion, after he had phoned the ELP to report that he was following terrorist leads into the Italian mafia. Brutto's death was only the latest in a series of well-targeted murders of Italian investigators, including judges responsible for unraveling the source of current, absolutely massive destabilization operations, including terrorism. At press time, the situation shapes up as follows. The right-wing, quote-unquote, side of the destabilization is being coordinated by Christian Democratic Senator Massimo De Carolis, noted subaltern of the Council on Foreign Relations, who earlier this month predicted, quote, an Iran-style wave of chaos to occur in Italy. De Carolis is currently touring Italy in the company of Enrico Pruner, Secretary of the South Tyrol Alpian Party, who emerged victorious in last week's regional elections on a platform of creating a central, quote, Europe of the regions, unquote, through the cooperation of the Alpian states under the leadership of the noted Bavarian neo-fascist Franz Josef Strauss, whose name came up, and I was doing other research today, and I was like, I've got to look into this, and then here he is, he's appearing here again. I have to look into this character more. De Carolis, in an interview November 26 with La Repubblica, offered Strauss as his model while announcing his Italian tour to organize the mass of discontented supporters of the Christian democracy, DC. In fact, De Carolis will be activating throughout the peninsula the avowedly fascist networks of the convicted former head of Italian military intelligence, Micheli, who was responsible for orchestrating the attempted coup d'etat of 1974. Micheli's fascist intelligence terrorist networks are run by the noted Luzzatto family of Venice, according to highly placed terrorist sources who should know. This is the same Strauss-allied Luzzatto family which helped finance the victory of the fascist parties in Italy's northern Alpian regions earlier this month, and whose representative will be traveling with De Carolis. That the wife of current U.S. Ambassador to Italy Gardner is Luzzatto should be no surprise, given the often documented role which the Italian ambassador has played in current and earlier destabilizations against the government of Premier Andreotti. On the left, on the quote, left wing side of this terrorist scenario stands the Italian Socialist Party, PSI, and the PSI-controlled Italian Socialist Democratic Party, PSDI, and the Radical Party of gay rights activist Panella. All three are now openly calling for a government collapse before December 4th, the date on which the European heads of state will meet to finalize arrangements for the January 1st creation of the European Monetary System, EMS. PSDI Secretary General Pietro Longo is demanding a meeting of party chiefs with the Prime Minister to discuss the issue of Italian entry into the new monetary system, while PSI Secretary Craxi is openly calling for a new government which would abolish the current cooperation between the Christian Democrats and the Italian Communist Party. Meanwhile, quote, left-wing terrorism operating out of the PSI Panella's radicals and the interfaced Red Brigade's gang continues unabated, escalating daily under the direction of the noble Pallavicini family, one of whose members is charged with the kidnapping of Aldo Moro. Thus far, the government has, however, managed to remain firm against this onslaught. As happened during the Moro affair, significant credit must be given to the government's decisive supporter, the PCI. Communist General Secretary Berlinguer has responded to targeted attacks on the cabinet's support for the European monetary system by releasing an interview on 25th of November, which, for the first time, grants the EMS unconditional support. The interview connects the need for a creation of a new world monetary system to the need for securing world peace and disarmament. Berlinguer denounces the current international monetary system for preventing development and threatening peace, at the same time extolling the, quote, intensive role which Italy and the rest of Europe must play to favor development of collaboration with the third world, disarmament, the safeguarding of peace, and the transformation of the present international economic order, which condemns more than 1/3 of humanity to hunger, underdevelopment, endemic diseases, and illiteracy. The Queen is responsible. Reflecting the enormous impact of the European Labour Party's book, Chi ha ucciso Aldo Moro, Panorama of 28th of November, ran the following coverage. Heading the plot was Elizabeth II of England. The British Crown, together with all the world's monarchies, including the House of Savoy, have been attempting to destabilize the Italian situation for a long time. The ELP, European Labour Party, a strange group, well-funded, self-defined as leftist, but suspected of being linked in reality to American conservative circles, is sure of it. In a book tantalizingly entitled Who Killed Aldo Moro, the ELP runs a 110-page story of the conspiracy. First of all, the general organization and its commanders. The Queen didn't work all alone. Helping her were the English Secret Services, Israeli Shin Beth, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, the Socialist International, the aristocracy in general. Then come the supporters, the Nazi British Mitterrand, the head of the Marseille clan, the socialist Michele Achilli, the organizer of the Mazzotto kidnapping, monarchist Indro Montanelli, all the members of the Caracciolo, Pallavicini, and Colonna families, Ripa di Meana, N. Massetti, then Amintore Fanfani, Umberto Agnelli, Massimo De Carolis, Giorgio Amendola, Giorgio Napolitano, Ugo Lamalfa, the inciter prison upsurges Stefano Rodota, Ionized mafioso Francesco Forte, the creator of the Red Brigades, Francesco Alberoni, the brigade's head, Mario Scialoggia, the terrorist supporter and environmentalist Panella, hoodlum, and heir to the throne, Charles of England. The Israeli agent Francesco Cossiga, the originator of black and red terrorism Giacomo Mancini, the notorious arms smuggler Victor Emmanuel of Savoy, and finally the man who left his own calling cards in the Via Gradoli office, Bettino Craxi. All these people, according to the ELP, form a perfectly meshed, trained organization. They've already killed Martin Luther King, John and Robert Kennedy, and Enrico Mattei. On their hit list are three other important entries: assassinate Helmut Schmidt, Giulio Andreotti, and especially the half-known president of the U.S. Labor Party, Lyndon LaRouche, the ideologue of the ELP and discoverer of the plot. But why did they kidnap and kill Aldo Moro? The ELP reveals the answer to this as well, because Moro, along with the sane forces of Italy, Michele Sindona, Giulio Andreotti, Enrico Berlinguer, Luigi Granelli, Flaminio Piccioli, Giovanni Leone, and of the world, Pope Paul VI, Brezhnev, the Shah of Persia, Giscard d'Estaing, Helmut Schmidt, Takeo Fukuda, was attempting to realize the grand design for economic and cultural development, which he knew to be the only solution for Italy. In order to kidnap Aldo Moro, according to the ELP, the order to kidnap Aldo Moro, according to the ELP, was given by British agent Piazzesi, the political editor of Il Corriere della Sera. On the 12th of March, Piazzesi wrote a long article concluding with the following phrase: Moro is one of those fatalists who accept death stoically, but only on one condition, that it come as late as possible. Unquote. The ELP comments that this article was more than a death knell. It was the marching order. In any case, Piazzesi, according to the ELP, is one of those British agents who require major attention. Thus, when he wrote on the 1st of August that Andreotti, quote, is a man devoted to sacrifice, who demonstrates a reassuring vitality and energy despite the fact that he is sometimes pictured as almost dead or about to die, unquote. For the ELP, this means that Piazzesi has fingered the next victim. But why is it that the destabilization plot, the attempted coup of April to bring Fanfani, the representative of the Savoy wing within the DC, into power didn't succeed? In sum, the ELP says it was the firm position taken by the Vatican, the government, and the PCI to outflank and foil the plot, despite the Anglophile press, Panorama, L'Espresso, La Repubblica, La Stampa, Il Messaggero, which did everything to create a favorable environment. The ELP editors precisely point out the place where Moro was kept prisoner. It is probable that the apartment in question is the one owned by Prince Johannes Schwarzenberg, ambassador of the Knights of Malta. The Palazzo Schwarzenberg, which has territorial immunity, stands at the corner between the Via delle Botteghe Oscure and the Via Caetani. And why wasn't the prince questioned about it? The plot thickens. The prince himself says the ELP was surprised by the fact that nobody asked him about it. Why not ask him now? Too late. The conclusion by the ELP is typical of the classic mystery thriller. Prince Schwarzenberg died in a car accident a few days after Moro's body was found. And I want to take a look at this. This chart here. Of course, anybody can download the full article, but just put that on the screen for a minute. It's quite incredible. You have the British crown on the top, Casa Savoia, the House of Savoy, in the middle, directly under the British crown. But you have an indication that Pallavicini, then you have the Internazionale Socialista on the left. The left wing, right? You see, left and right. That's one of the defining features of synarchism. And then that's on the left, on the right, Internazionale Nera, the Black International. And